Are you going to take it away, Libby?
And that would be evidence
Who's
of
got the
our
ball?
PFCC partner, somewhat discombobulated. I'd love to, Lindsay.
Okay, we're recorded.
Please go to the next slide. All right, for those of you who haven't joined us before, welcome very much to the Patient Family Advisory Network virtual meeting. We have these meetings once a month to convene our community, and this is a light crowd for today. We're usually hovering around 20 to 25 folks that join us. I expect that we'll have some latecomers as well today, but this is our opportunity to kind of share sort of what's going on with each of us in our communities and how we're supporting partnership or supporting healthcare to improve through partnerships. So for anybody who hasn't been familiar with Zoom, here is your cheat sheet to where everything is. I really encourage you to keep yourselves on mute while not speaking, but please feel free to take yourself off and comment. This is really intended to be a discussion time for all of us. As well, you can use the chat function. If you hover on the bottom there, you see it. You can open the chat box and speak up. All right, next slide, please. So I am Libby Hoy, founder and CEO of Patient and Family Centered Care Partners, and together with my partner in crime, Lindsay Galley. Lindsay, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Lindsay Galley here. I'm the Director of Education at PFCC Partners. I've seen a lot of you before. Great to see all of you again, and looking forward to today's virtual meeting and talking about some upcoming education opportunities we have as well for all of you.
Right. Excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, PFCC Partners is the organization that I founded in 2010. The Patient Family Advisory Network is a program of PFCC Partners. Through the organization, PFCC Partners subcontracts with health systems, quality improvement organizations, research teams, measurement development teams, anyone interested really, to help support those organizations to implement authentic patient-family engagement. And that is all of us coming together in partnership with those teams to improve outcomes across healthcare settings, across the healthcare continuum. So I think there's been a little bit of confusion I've heard back recently, and I'll open this to discussion as well in terms of how PFCC Partners and the PFA network work together. It's through those contracts that we completely support the PFA network. And so all of the activities that we have, these virtual meetings, the Yammer community, the ability to connect you with engagement opportunities, all of that is supported through the work we do with through PFCC Partners. So maybe the next slide will help clarify a little bit more too. Not that one. Can you go to the next one and we'll come back to that one? Thank you. So this is sort of a depiction of our entire organization. At the foundation is the Patient Family Advisory Network, the community. That is because we all serve as patient family advisors ourselves. And in fact, that's how I started this organization, from that perspective. That's my expertise. That's all I have. I don't have a lot of letters behind my last name. I only have BS, and I don't like to start with that because it doesn't really increase my credibility. But everything we do comes from the perspective of the patient family advisor. In the gray box, you see some of the places that our staff is currently partnering. And then you see on the left, the Patient Family Centered Care Partners infrastructure supporting organizations. And on the right, the advisor support. So we sort of, if you will, look at ourselves as having two customers. One is the health system or the healthcare organizations, and the other is all of you, all of us together learning about the role of advisor as it's continued to explode over the last few years, and we don't see that slowing down anytime in the future, certainly not in 2019. We know that it's also important for us to come together as a community and sort through some of these issues that are being discussed, such as compensation. We're invited our member, Zal Press, to share with us his work. We'll get to that in just a minute. So my goal for the PFA network is to have an opportunity to learn together with all of us and sort of chart our own future, right? I don't want there to be conversations about how we compensate advisors without advisors in that conversation. And the more that we grow as a community, the stronger our voice becomes and the more that we're able to bring those conversations forward. So I just wanted everybody to kind of have an understanding about how the PFA network is a program of PFCC partners, but is a fundamental to all of the work that we do. Any questions about that? All right. Lindsay, will you help me monitor chat, please? Almost impossible for me to talk.
I got it. No problem.
And then could you go back that one slide to the vision for the PFA network? Please. Thank you so much. I know I'm going out of order and making it hard on you.
All good.
So this is the vision for the PFA network. It's really to again, facilitate that community. We have community activities, such as what we're joining here today. We have skills development. So we have a number of training programs that we do not charge patient family advisors to join. We really just feel if we are raising the capacity of all of us together to effectively partner, the organizations we're partnering with are going to spread that practice and include more and more. And then finally, that engagement opportunity. We are contacted daily. I think I started this conversation saying monthly, and then I went to weekly, daily by regional and national programs who are looking for advisors with a certain lived experience, or maybe a certain age group, or maybe a region. And so we're able to go through our registry, which is all of the survey responses all of you have given us, and do some of that matchmaking. So I just want you to be aware that those are the three primary functions of the PFA network. All right, we can move forward to now, I think, if I'm tracking correctly. So in terms of our community, it is growing weekly as well. I want to welcome all of our new patient family advisors from since our last virtual meeting in December. We are excited. Greg, I'd like to call you out and say welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. And please feel free to ask any questions at all. Next, please. All right, the Yammer community is a place that we can continue the conversation in between these virtual meetings. And I want to make mention that we have approached the compensation conversation a couple of times through these virtual meetings. And as that conversation evolved, it was decided to start a compensation work group. So we have a number, I think it's 6 or 7 advisors from the network who are moving the conversation forward, grappling. They did an environmental scan of current practices, which included Zal's project. And from that, we're kind of creating a value statement. So Lindsay's taken a quick stab at, at generating that. Lindsay, do you want to share just a second about that and ask for feedback?
Yeah, so for the compensation work group, and this I posted on Yammer for the compensation work group members, but trying to put together a value statement, and I think I've seen this as a theme in the environmental scan that the work group did, but and I don't have it up on my screen at this moment, but really looking at the diversity and inclusion of patient family advisors, and being able to reach those patient family advisors that, or have them participate as patient family advisors when they normally haven't had the opportunity for one reason or another. And being compensated, we all know, can really provide that opportunity to them. So I've also created kind of a project outline that states the aim statement of, or the aim, the goal of the compensation work group, and then what this project looks like. What is the outcome of this compensation work group going to be? And so I would appreciate any feedback. It's posted on Yammer. I appreciate those who have already provided some feedback. That's really helpful. But I think we're really looking at trying to provide the healthcare environment some standards on what works for compensating advisors. And I think that that's something that we need to figure out is what does work, and what has worked in the past, studying organizations that have compensated advisors before, getting that very large patient family advisor perspective as well on compensation. Do advisors want to be compensated? Would it help their or support their engagement to engage further on even national levels? So it's there on Yammer, and would love any input.
Absolutely. And that is probably the best cue up I can have for introducing Gal Press, our wonderful colleague to the north of us. And Zal, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Libby, and thanks, Lindsay, and all for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the work that I've been involved in. Libby knows me from a while back, and you know, I learned a lot from my first interactions with Libby and learning about patient and family advisors, how to manage a PFAC, and you know, we shared some time together on the Barrel Institute Global Patient and Family Advisory Council. So that's kind of where Libby and I got started in a relationship, and it's really gratifying to see the kind of work that's evolved for PFCC partners, and how robust an organization you know it's turned into. So kudos to the entire group, and thanks so much for including me. I've been doing patient commando work. That's kind of how you know, I refer to myself. You'll find me on social media as Patient Commando. Basically, I'm a dedicated patient activist with one clear intent and objective, and that's to empower the patient voice and empower patient choice, not only in care and treatment, but also you know, in all of the interactions that go you know, through a patient you know, lived experience. So if you want to move the slides, we'll get on it. So about 6 years ago, to tell you the truth, I was working with a group to you know, to organize a full day event for healthcare professionals, and you know, the central part of the whole event was to bring patients to share their narratives about the lived experience with type 1 diabetes, and bring it out in an altogether new way. And they were asked to come for a full day to spend their day with these healthcare professionals, going through a variety of different exercises and through narrative exercises. And so I said to the lead organizer, I said, well, I'm going to bring these patients, I'm going to counsel them on how to share their narrative, I'm going to prep them, I'm going to coach them. They're going to spend a whole day, take a whole day out of their time to come here. How much are you willing to pay? And I've got to tell you, it was, you know, that was the first time I ever asked the question. And all I got was, are you kidding? As an answer coming from the organizer, who's a healthcare professional, a researcher, one of the top type 1 researchers in Canada. So that's kind of where I had to start making an argument, you know, for the sake of value, and to, you know, in terms of respect of people's time and effort, energy, intellectual capacity, intellect, and personal lived experience, you know, as, you know, at the table, bringing that all together at the table, you know, with healthcare professionals. So we'll change the slide now. So it got me thinking, you know, I came across this quote, it's not Vernon's Law. Some people mistake Vernon's Law, thinking it's kind of like a Murphy's Law. Well, Vernon Law was a baseball player, you know, in the 50s and 60s. And he said, experience is a hard teacher because she gives the test first, the lesson afterwards. And really, if you think about the patient experience, that to me is exactly what happens with patients. You get experience first, and then you try to figure out what that means. Healthcare professionals, on the other hand, are completely opposite. They get jam-packed with all kinds of lessons, and then try to make sense out of that in terms of what the experience is. So I think it's kind of important to see the mutual relationship, the reciprocal relationship that exists here between patients and healthcare professionals, and how we need to begin to sort of look at things and wonder how we bring the lessons to the table. And we know that organizations today, progressive organizations, do not learn lessons without patients at the table. So carry on the slide. Next, there we go. So one of my co-authors on the paper that we did on patient compensation, and I'll give you the details on that a little bit later, but she's got a PhD in chemistry, but the PhD she's really proud of is her PhD in lived experience, having lived with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years. And for her, it's a juvenile, it was early onset rheumatoid arthritis. So, and she feels that this lived experience of hers is equivalent to the PhD that she acquired, through her academic experience. So let me ask you, all of you, would you bring that kind of perspective to your lived experience in terms of the value, the amount of effort, energy, and intensity of study that you've put into understanding your experience or the experience of a loved one? That to me is equal, to what we call the PhD in lived experience. Next slide.
That's such a shift, Zal, I'm sorry, for a lot of advisors who, like me, have been doing this since the mid-90s. It's a very profound shift in thinking. Thank you.
And so if we look at what's been happening, with organizations bringing patient advisors to the table, getting involved in research. I mean, there's a number of different activities. The National Health Council, is organizing a whole initiative around fair market value for people who are involved in medicines and medicine equipment development. It's building on the efforts of the patient-focused medical development enterprise in Europe. So you're going to see over the next couple of years, greater energy and effort in this. In the UK, the National Health Service has a whole organization called Involve, which is dedicated to bringing patients and public participation in research throughout the National Health Service. So medical sociologist Carl May commented some time ago, and yes, there is a medical sociologist. I can't tell you exactly what that title really means, and what the scope of that is, just as I can't tell you about the scope of work for the philosopher in residence at Baycrest Hospital here in Toronto, although I'd love to have a title called philosopher in residence. And nevertheless, what Carl May is saying here is that essentially with all the work and effort and energy that patient advisors are putting into healthcare improvement efforts, essentially they're now conceptualized as part of the healthcare workforce. And so this is what's different. This is what's evolved, and all the time that Libby's been, working with PFCC and partners and bringing, all of this new energy and effort and new processes to help, quality improvement. This is what's kind of happened, is that we've gone from really a volunteer-based enterprise to one that's really a task-based enterprise, one that's utilizing skills, one that's utilizing great capacity, intellectual capacity, intellect, and intelligence, and in an altogether new way. And as a consequence, given that you're now reaching into the targets, of the workforce, then, or at least in terms of the targets set by a workforce scope of work, you now have an opportunity to actually create new inequalities. And this is one of the things that we wanted to address in the work that we did. Next slide, please. So I should say that the four co-authors of our paper are all patients. Dawn Richards who is the PhD among us, is also Director of Patient Engagement for Clinical Trials Ontario, and she's done a broad-based number of jobs, in patient engagement, patient participation. You'll find her writing, researching, not only in Canada, but in Europe as well. Isabel Jordan is and heads up a rare disease foundation in Canada. Full credentials. Kimberly Strain as well, and myself are all people with lived illness experience. So for us, the question is this really is compensation a question of value, the value of the contributions? Is it about equality, bringing people, at the table, in terms of equal treatment? Or is it, about reciprocity, that there be a fair exchange, a return of goods or services or sentiment or something like that? We weren't really sure, but this is where we began our conversation. Next slide. So we've come up with 5 basic principles that we worked with to really, set the framework for how we began to look at this. And it took quite a while to land on these, and they're not exclusive. And, we're not going to say that, they're finite either in terms of, what the basic principles might be. So our first principle is essentially the removing barriers to participation. I hear it over and over and over again that that one of the key challenges to patient participation is the objective of full diversity and inclusivity. That it's almost impossible for organizations to really achieve, and fulfill that kind of objective within the context of the ways that they're doing it now. So we feel that without compensation, that the only participants that they're going to get are those who can afford to volunteer. And that limits the involvement of all the other voices in the community that, are part of the organization that, or part of the community that an organization would serve. Next slide. Equity is really the key, fundamental principle that I think that every PFAC likely has in their terms of reference. And so we're not going to shy away from this either. But if you look at it in the context of what's happening, and we looked, mostly at research, but really, it's just about all the work that patient advisors are doing, whether they be on an improvement committee or whether they be on, on a hiring committee, really still is, is research-based, because we're testing these models. We're growing our understanding of how these models are being applied. So basically, we see that there's a fundamental power imbalance when all the team members are paid except for a patient. And, patients bring experience, they bring expertise, they bring skill, and just like everybody else on the team. So to participate in these kinds of activities, patients also sacrifice. They sacrifice time, they sacrifice other duties. And overall, there's a cost to the patient to be engaged in improvement projects. So we're really looking at bringing some degree of equity in here and recognizing this power imbalance. Next slide. I don't hear it enough that, and in terms of enough conversation around the different motivations that people have for getting involved in this. And I'm not talking only about patients, I'm talking about the professionals with whom they collaborate. For professionals, and we really need to think about this, I mean, why are they doing this in the first place? Well, first of all, aside from it being part of their job, it provides them with increased prestige. It provides them with what we call social capital, and it provides them with career advancement. So it's not just, the goodness of their heart, it's part of their job, they want to do this. There's meaningful rewards for them to be involved with this. And all of these factors can impact their future earning potential as well. Now, for patients, we recognize that these motivations are generally not the case. But we need to understand patient motivations in the context of of the social and the emotional needs and values that inspire participation. And we're still working on understanding what those social and emotional values are and how to define them. It's quite a work in progress. Next slide, please. Respect for vulnerability is, is our way of saying that patients are motivated to participate in this work, frankly, because for the most part, in many instances, they've suffered a trauma. And it's this lived experience of this trauma that makes them vulnerable. People will be always exposing themselves, exposing their vulnerability, exposing their painful and intimate experiences that feed into this lived experience. And they're doing it all in the name of improvement. Let me tell you from my own personal experience, it's not a risk-free exercise. And there can be traumatic and unintended consequences as a result of this participation. So this risk-taking for the sake of improvement really does deserve respect and recognition, of the value of the work. And respect for this vulnerability is key to understanding why we feel that value is such an important part, of the compensation equation and how we need to begin to quantify it. Next slide, please. So everybody's committed to this. There's no question. When I, sit down at a table with patients, there could be people who only have 5 minutes a month, and then there's some people who are just running around the halls of the government all day long, trying to bring change into the world of healthcare. So it ranges. There's all kinds of ranges of, of commitment. And we understand that some people prefer not to be compensated. And that reflects back on their social and emotional values, for the motivations for becoming involved in the first place. But patients do juggle their time, in order to participate. They may have medical duties, jobs, family, other social activities, other social commitments. So they do juggle everything in terms of trying to bring their time to be participants in this. And we kind of feel that compensation can be an agent, not only an incentive, but an agent to generate deeper commitment from people who have competing interests. Next slide, please. So these are our 5 basic principles that, we've sort of landed on to get really, a conversation going. Our whole intent here in writing this paper, and I'll give you the details at the end, was really about bringing the patient perspective, because we're all patients, bringing the patient perspective to the table here in a really coherent kind of way that can act as a tool not only for patients in a conversation, but also for healthcare professionals, for researchers, for academics, for everybody involved in building authentic and realistic patient partnerships. So these are where we've started with, and I invite you to add to this and build on this. Everything that we're doing is really about inviting you to build on it. Next slide, please. So we have one golden rule, and that is start the conversation. I can tell you from experience, if patients don't start the conversation, it's rare that a healthcare professional, a researcher, an academic is going to start the conversation. So our paper is meant to be a tool and, to allow you to walk in and speak with your healthcare partners and say, hey, listen, this is a conversation we need to start. Or, to allow, to give the healthcare professional this document and say, here's a document that will allow you to start the conversation with patient partners that you're going to be involving in your research. Don't wait for it to be an afterthought. Build it into the, to the project right at the outset. So this is our kind of way of saying, this is all about starting the conversation. It's a difficult conversation, and because of the power imbalance, oftentimes people feel embarrassed to bring up the topic, but it's an important one. And we're finding that more and more people around the globe, from Australia and New Zealand and UK and Denmark and Holland and Italy and South America and Brazil and Argentina and throughout the United States and throughout Canada, people are talking about this. So even though we're all new at this, just like Dilbert is new at trying to sell something to somebody, this is a way for us to get started. Next slide, please. So you can find our paper on the Patient Experience Journal. It's called Patient Partner Compensation and Research in Healthcare. And I encourage you to download it. And the reason why I encourage you to download it is because we're trying to set a new record in terms of downloads at the Patient Experience Journal. We have a long way to go. There's another patient, Kathy Torpy from New Zealand, who has the record at something like 35,000 downloads, but we're on the way. And the more people we can get to download, the more interest and the better we're going to be able to chart the impact that this paper is having. So you can get it at the Patient Experience Journal, and if you've got questions, you're able to to send them to me directly or to any one of us. All our emails are there. So thanks so much for your time. I'm open to conversation, to questions. Where would you like to start?
Really great presentations, Al. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all of the points that you've made. And maybe noticed me sitting here nodding constantly because I think this is a lot of the conversation that we've been having. And Greg, I really love your comments in the chat box. Do you want to expand on the ideas you've been thinking about a little bit about behavioral economics? I'm not as familiar with what that term means.
Sure.
I understand the rest of what you wrote, but I'm not so sure about that term.
Sure. So I just want to say thanks. I found this, Zal, I now can't remember, but just recently, and sent it to the University of Michigan, where I'm doing some work with them. And I just think it's exactly what needs to happen to begin to shift the culture. And another thing I was about to say was, if we believe patients, and I do believe patients have to be much more than just responders of how satisfied they were with the care, which is good. I'm not saying that we shouldn't figure that out.
Yes, and.
The and then becomes, we've got to figure out ways in which to leverage, particularly those who have no experience in the healthcare system, so that meaning their academic background, their life experiences, their careers, their life experiences are not caught up in the ways in which healthcare operates. And the system that now exists in at least American healthcare, and one could argue around the world, there are lots of places where this would be the case, that patients who are not in that system can be the innovators that affect change, not just in how well the care is, which I think is important, but also how we solve the logistical issues, the back of the house stuff, the fact that, and we don't ask patients that, and I think we've got to figure out ways that would say that if we can build a movement to have patients be the innovators, we might very well get to a place that says, well, how could you not compensate them? It doesn't make any sense. So I was writing that, so I won't send that as the chat. What I'd say about behavioral economics, so there's a huge field out now that talks about everything from, much of it is around the idea of how do you nudge for good to get to a place where people begin to behave in ways that are in the best interest. And so the reason why I raised that here is that, from your very beginning point, which is about how do you have ease and have more opportunities for people to not be a bunch of barriers to get involved, the book I'd recommend as a starting place for everybody is a book called Nudge, which is an older book that gets you involved in the idea of behavioral economics. And its essence is really I mean, if you think about the idea of the word nudge, and you think about what happens, you're nudged when you arrive at a healthcare system, when the first thing you see is a piece of paper that you begin to fill out that nudges you towards the way in which this experience is going to operate. So how are all the ways that we're nudged to behaviors that actually have not been wonderful? Too many of us, when we have a healthcare provider who's phenomenal, we rave about that. That seems crazy to me. We should be the other way around. That it should never be that we're raving about the ones that are unbelievable. We should be saying, can you believe that this person was so not good? The system was really made me feel like a widget in a factory. That should be wrong. And in fact, that's what we just tolerate now. So we've got to figure out ways to nudge to say that should not be how healthcare operates. So sorry,
No, not at all.
It is Richard.
I really appreciate the explanation and the recommendation of the book. And I think that, so I've been involved as a patient family advisor. It's my only background is raising 3 boys with mitochondrial disease. And when I started, we were really excited to comment on the color of the paint on the wall. We weren't really partners. And as we've evolved, and as our policy partners such as CMS and National Academy of Medicine and Institute for Healthcare Improvement and others have imposed a bit of a nudge on the environment, we've gotten more space and we've gotten more opportunity. So what you're saying is resonating with me so much in such a timely fashion. And Desiree, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but on our compensation work group, this is kind of where we've gotten to is this is the time to start the conversation, as Al says, and in that conversation, it's a nudge. And how do we start to bring organizations that have found value in partnering with patients and families? How do we move them upstream to the budgeting and to when they're putting a project together to include? Because to me, that's how we get patient-family engagement hardwired into the health system across settings, is in addition to removing barriers so that every patient, every family member has the opportunity to contribute. So Desiree, I called on you and then I kept talking, sorry.
No, it's okay. I would echo all those sentiments. I think as I'm going through my own personal struggles in my own home hospital of trying to work compensation into even the thought for them, it's an uncomfortable conversation. And I think now is the time to tackle these uncomfortable yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's not going away. And so, yeah, I think, we just have to keep on pushing. And I know I'm pretty persistent, but I know a lot of my peers are not. After they've gotten the brick walls, they'll fall back. And I think it's a charge for us even more to say, you know what? Okay, you may not be able to keep on pushing, but we got you, and we will keep on doing this. So I would echo, now is the time to kind of put the fire to their feet. It's time.
I really appreciate that. I think that's what's given me, me having conversations about compensation for me personally, horribly uncomfortable, and I'll avoid them like the plague to the point that I've volunteered a lot more than I probably should have. But anyway, but as a representative of this community, absolutely I can advocate for compensation for everyone, because I do feel strongly that it's a pathway to equity. So I don't know, how do others feel?
Just to speak a little bit in reference to being on both sides, 22 years in dentistry. And I think the start that Sal talked about was a patient voice. The voice comes first for me. The compensation will come along. And I think that a dialogue and a communication in Pennsylvania about 5 years ago, I participated on the PFAC for 2.5 years at Fox Chase Cancer Center. In my current PFAC, it's a new startup in New Jersey, and difference of the two PFACs is a difference of night and day. The one is a small community hospital here in New Jersey. The other is a internationally recognized cancer center on the East Coast. I was a patient myself at Fox Chase and went to a survivor event and met one of the social workers at the table. And she said to me, have you been a patient here? I said, yeah, survivor melanoma. And I said to her, what's this PFAC stuff? She said, well, let me give you an invitation to the next meeting. And I said, okay. Walked into the first meeting, and the first thing was everybody's introduction, but the two co-leaders of the PFAC at Fox Chase Cancer Center had said to me, Harvey, why don't you share your story? And there it was, sitting around the table, strangers that I didn't know, that I later found out was the CEO, the CMO, CNO, and all the other acronyms, volunteer services, and the social worker herself. And all of these people were there for the same purpose: communicating, telling stories, sharing, and bringing it forward. I am definitely not opposed to compensation because, and I think I put that in the post that I put yesterday in Yammer, because, but I'm currently reading a book by a retired professor in nutrition from NYU and Cornell. She talks about the food industry and the big pharma and conflict of interest when it comes to money. She has published and she found herself, but a big conflict of interest is the lack of telling what funding has represented your research. And
sure. I think that brings up sort of some of Val's points in his paper about both sharing your story and the investment and the vulnerability that you're investing when you're participating, and also points to Greg's comments in terms of I don't see this compensation issue as a one fit all solution. I think we're going to have flexibility in it, because we've got folks like you, Harvey, who feel that, you know, you're not against compensation, but maybe don't need it for your advisory efforts, but where others may need that in order to have that kind of participation. So I don't think it's going to be, and I think you've heard me say several times, compensation is a big hairy animal, because there's all kinds of different lenses on it, and they're all very valuable. And I love the way that you sort of organize that, Zal, in your paper. So I think that's really kind of speaks to the difficulty of coming up to a solution. So I wonder, and I'm looking at the time because we could have this conversation for a couple hours, I think. I wonder if, she gives me another idea. But anyway, if a next step for this group might be to continue to work on that value statement Lindsay talked about, integrate this paper that Zal has graciously given. And Zal, we will blast this from the high heavens for all of our community.
Thank you.
yes,
I love Kathy. I love Kathy, and her work's been great, but we'll just put you over the top of that. She's been owning it. So we'll get that out. But maybe those would be a couple of next steps. And then I'm thinking of, Desiree, your comments and thinking about how do we put that together in a package for your average advisor who is approached for a speaking event to say, I'm asking for compensation, but here's all of these, my community's with me, and here's this, this is the evidence that shows this is the direction we're going. Does that sound like a reasonable next step?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And let me just throw out there too, because anybody who wants to join us on the compensation work group meetings, those are once a month. I don't have the date in front of me, and our assistant went out to lunch, so
I think
I'll
it's
get that
the last Monday of each month.
last Monday of each month. Do you have a time?
Around noon-ish
Ish.
Pacific time.
We'll get that out to you in a follow-up email. But I would encourage anyone who's interested to continue this conversation with us, because we really, whatever we move forward, we really want to be reflective of this community as a group thought, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Zal, thank you so much. I know you're a very busy man, and this body of work that you've put together here is really important and critical to moving this field forward. So as always, it's amazing to be in this work with you, and I'm really thankful for your time.
Well, great to be here, and thanks again for the opportunity to share. Happy to communicate with everybody. I love some of the comments I heard today. Nudge. In fact, I was talking about the nudge movement. With my son as a journalist. Covers government affairs in our capital here in Canada, and he was telling me about some nudge specialists within some of the ministries, and it is an important thing. I think there's cultural resistance to compensation. We've been socialized in a particular way to think about ourselves, as members in the healthcare community in a particular way. And I think it's not only the healthcare professionals that need the nudging. I think the patients as well, need to be nudged just a little bit. So hopefully we've done a little bit of that today. And thank you, Greg, for bringing that up. I think it's a great, symbolic phrase to bring to this conversation. I'm going to include it in the future. So thanks again to everybody for attending. It was really, really a privilege to be with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. And next slide, please, Lindsay. And Zal, as much as you want a philosopher title, I'll take the nudge specialist title. I think that's like awesome. Lindsay, do you want to share a little bit about your trainings coming up?
Yeah, really quickly, we have put together kind of a series of educational opportunities offered by PFCC partners, but to the PFAnetwork, so all of the advisors who are interested in participating. I'm sure a lot of you have participated in the core competencies training. We offered this twice last year. So for those advisors who are new to the network, would love to see you on January 16th and 23rd for the core competencies training. It's a two-part online series where we go through the core competencies of effective partners that you can see in that triangle on the right of your screen. Really, this training is meant to help support your efforts and partnerships with healthcare organizations and your partnership as a patient family advisor in everything that you do. So I'd love to see everyone there. And these, I will say, have been included on the newsletter, and you'll see some email blasts about those coming your way via email. We also, we'll talk about this next month, and going forward next month, we have a quality basics for advisors training where we'll talk all about quality improvement. So for those advisors who are getting more into quality improvement projects within their organizations, we'll go through some kind of basic understanding of quality improvement. And then finally, measurement basics course. That's just a one-time offering. It's an hour and a half, and we'll talk about measurement in healthcare. It's I think kind of a new but growing thing for advisors to participate on. So I'm really excited that we're able to offer this training and provide all of the PFAnetwork advisors more information about measurements in healthcare. And really quickly also, I just wanted to give a quick report on the National Health Information Technology Advisory Council. We did some great work last year, and we're continuing to push forward this year. Last year, the Advisory Council was able to draft 2 letters that were dispersed to healthcare organizations and vendors, describing some issues that we found with navigation to Open Notes. Open Notes put together a white paper that these letters were a part of, and they were disseminated in hopes to encourage healthcare organizations to work with their vendors to make some changes to make navigating to their physicians' notes a little bit easier, and for vendors to work on their systems and make the navigation process easier for the end user. Moving forward, we have a couple projects that we're kind of deciding on our priorities right now, one being building the perfect patient portal, which is something that we had a lot of excitement on our last meeting, and then looking at how to increase the utilization of patient portals. I think that's one thing to understand that you have notes from your physician after every visit, but another thing to get those people who might not use their portal as much just to get on and use it and be really active partners in their healthcare. So a couple things in the works right now, and we're looking forward to a really exciting year.
So as we continue to learn and continue to grow with the PFA network, one of our challenges is to open the line of understanding and learning with all of you as advisors on the front line, sort of, and healthcare across the country. So a couple of things that we're doing, and I'm hoping that this will, I'm not hoping, I'm planning. Hope is not a plan. I'm planning that this will support the compensation conversation as we begin with those engagement opportunities where we're matching advisors with an organization. We're now implementing an evaluation. So we're evaluating the experience from both the process of the organization and professional members, but also with the advisor. So we want to see where those line up and maybe where there's some discrepancies. And one of the things that we'd like to think about as well is gathering all of your experiences within those partnerships, either the ones we're matching you up with or the ones that you're experiencing in your local settings. And one of our concepts, which I'll throw out there, and I'd love feedback through the chat on what you think. I really feel strongly that we need to be humble in our learning and acknowledge that we learn most when we fail. I mean, I know I do. PFCC Partners is a walking PDSA cycle. We really just continue to improve and evolve. And so one of the concepts that I've been reading about and thinking about is the failure university. So could we gather experiences in terms of what you learned from those failures or what organizations learned from those failures, and just take a different look at how we can grow and experience. So I'd love to hear your thoughts when you have a moment. Next slide.
Libby,
please.
there's actually a quick question from Greg. When you match, do you state that patients need to be compensated? Health Heart Alliance does this when they match patients with organizations.
So that's my responsibility, is starting all those conversations. I would say when we started matching, it was maybe 20% of the conversations. Now it's on our form. You have to let us know if you're offering a stipend. If you're not, then we make it an all call. If you are, and if because we do a lot of training and support of the advisors through their engagement opportunity. If we're collecting a fee, the advisors are getting paid through that fee. So we've been able to, through that model, increase the number of paid engagement opportunities. I would roughly, I'll get a number for you, but roughly I would say by at least 50%, maybe 75%.
So just a quick comment about that. It may be that the culture shift comes from the expectation is that does happen. That then begins to move the system to say, oh, if we match, we're going to be expected to do this. That way you sort of begin to eradicate the notion that patients could still turn it down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the point. The point is to make the option to the patient, not to the healthcare system, to be allowed out.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And as an example of exactly what you just said, the National Quality Forum, NQF, is a regular of ours who comes to us for patients and families for all of their teams. They're very much committed to having the patient-family voice at the table. And when we started with them, it was that tentative conversation. Well, it'd be nice if you know, and now because we've had so many opportunities to support them, then it got to, well, we'll pay for their travel. And now they have an internal team to figure out how are we going to pay advisors and how are we going to offer that compensation. So to your point, that's kind of what we're seeing. Hard to be patient sometimes, but that's on the right track anyway. All right. This is what we've been talking about. So I'm going to continue this conversation on Yammer and invite any of you who, again, would like to join us. And then finally, really quick, because I think we're almost at time, engagement opportunities. Here is some of the engagement opportunities that are in front of us right now. A couple that I'll call out. We are looking for advisors from California, preferably Southern California, to join us in Seal Beach, California on Tuesday, February 5th for a Spirit of Transformation event. Some of you may have heard of the Transforming Clinical Practice Initiative, TCPI. This is one of the local transformation networks having their annual meeting, and this is going to be a great event. We're helping to plan this. Advisors are going to be very integrated into the whole day. So if anybody's interested in that, please let me know. There is compensation available for them, for advisors to do that. The other one I want to bring your attention to, this again is another region-based, but the Telegen Beneficiary Family Advisory Council. Telegen is a quality improvement organization under the Quinn QIO program, and they are recruiting right now to their regional BFAC. So if you are a resident of Colorado, Illinois, or Iowa, and you're either a Medicare beneficiary or caring for someone who is, please let us know so we can catch you up with that group. I think, Lindsay, am I forgetting anything?
I was muted. I know that there's a lot more engagement opportunities and that a lot of those are posted on Yammer. So if you're interested in perusing more, I know there's some there, and Libby does a great job of connecting advisors as well. There is one final question, if we have just another minute, from Patty. Have you brought in CMS with their grant requirements to participate with PFACs? Any conversation about compensating their advisors?
Yes and yes. So we have had lots of great conversations with CMS leads in their patient-family engagement affinity group, talking about how this is bubbling up as a conversation, and it's something that they need to really pay attention to. CMS, for those of you who aren't familiar, is on the cusp of awarding contracts for the next 5 to 10 years. And so within that contract cycle previously, they mandated patient-family engagement and even gave some measurements, but they never gave budget to it. And so we've really been pushing with them and having some great conversations that in this next round that comes out, they continue the mandate, but they also allow for budget items in there, because we've got over 200 advisors that are working within the Quinn QIO program, and the Quinn QIO budgets are restricted to the point they can't even offer a cup of coffee. So we really need to line that up with the CMS patient-family engagement strategy, which is really pushing engagement across the board. So yes, those conversations are going on, and CMS has been pretty open to them. For any of you who are thinking about joining us for the annual conference, I just got a call today that we have, our keynote speaker has been Dennis Wagner, who's the lead at CMS, but his partner, Dr. Paul McGann, we just found out today, will also be joining us. So if you can get to Los Angeles in February, the weather's nice. We would love to see you, and there are scholarships for registration for advisors. So be in touch with us if you're interested in that. All right. Well, this is my favorite hour of the month, hanging out with you guys. So thank you so much for your time and thought-provoking conversation and comments. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Happy New Year.
Good luck.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.